Do you think you can just walk away from me? The ice sculpture didn't just crack, it shattered. A waiter's tray lurched sideways. A string quartet stumbled mid-note. Somewhere near the back, a woman in red gasped so sharply she knocked her neighbor's wine glass clean off the table. 200 heads turned in perfect unison. The music collapsed into silence. At the center of the grand ballroom, Maya Chen stood motionless. Her ivory gown caught the light from 1,000 crystal fixtures above her. Her hair, pinned with a mother-of-pearl comb, remained perfectly in place even as her head snapped sideways from the blow. For a stretched, impossible moment, nobody moved. Then slowly her fingers climbed to her jaw. A bruise was already forming, dark against her warm brown skin. Her eyes were wide, not with tears, not with rage. Just with the cold, quiet recognition of exactly who she was dealing with. Across the polished marble floor stood a stocky man in an ill-fitting rental suit. His name was Derek. His chest heaved. His outstretched arm still hung in the air as though his body hadn't caught up with what his brain had just done. "You think you can just replace me, Maya?" he shouted, his voice shattering what little silence remained. A few guests pressed closer. Others stepped back. A child near the buffet table started to cry. But Derek wasn't watching the most important person in the room. He was watching Maya. And that was the only mistake he needed to make, because the man beside her had gone completely, unnervingly still. Marcus Weil didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't shift his weight even a fraction of an inch. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, his jaw set, his dark eyes locked onto Derek with the patient, absolute focus of a man who had spent his entire career making problems disappear quietly. He breathed in slowly through his nose, adjusted the cufflink on his left wrist, and then, barely perceptibly, he smiled. Not the smile of a man who was angry, the smile of a man who had already decided exactly how this evening was going to end. But to understand how any of this happened, you have to understand Maya Chen, because Maya didn't grow up in ballrooms. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Oakland, the daughter of a seamstress who worked 6 days a week and still sometimes came up short on rent. Their kitchen table doubled as a homework desk, a sewing station, and a dinner table, depending on the hour. Maya learned early that the world was not going to slow down to accommodate her, so she refused to slow down either. By 15, she was tutoring other students for $5 an hour. By 17, she had mapped out every scholarship available to a girl with her grades and her zip code. By the time she graduated college with honors, her mother cried not because she was surprised, but because she understood exactly how much it had cost. And then Maya left, not running away, but running toward a corporate internship in Singapore, then a junior analyst role in Hong Kong. Then a senior position in Zurich that nobody her age should have been able to land. Each move was calculated. Each step was deliberate. Maya Chen did not stumble into success. She reverse-engineered it. In those glass-walled offices, she was often the youngest person at the table, frequently the only woman of color in the room, always the most prepared person in the building. She didn't compensate by being louder or bolder. She compensated by being undeniable, meticulous research, precise timing, an almost preternatural ability to read the temperature of any room before she spoke a single word. It earned her a reputation that traveled faster than her resume. And it earned her something else too, a certain internal stillness, the kind that only develops when you've spent years operating in spaces that were never designed for you. What it didn't protect her from was Derek. Derek came into her life during a brief return to California for a friend's birthday. He was standing at the edge of a rooftop bar, laughing loudly at something someone else had said, taking up space with the ease of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. He was funny, in an unpolished, instinctive way. He was warm. He made Maya laugh in a register she'd almost forgotten she had. After years of structured ambition, he felt like a deep exhale. They dated long distance for 8 months. It was inconvenient and expensive, and somehow still worth it at first. But over time, the cracks began to surface. Calls that went unreturned for days, stories with edges that didn't quite line up, an irritability that would flare whenever Maya mentioned a promotion or a speaking engagement or any evidence that her world was expanding. "You're so focused on your career," he'd say, as though it were a character flaw. What he meant, though he would never have admitted it, was that she didn't need him. And for Derek, a woman who didn't need him was a woman he couldn't fully control. Maya ended it on a Wednesday morning from a hotel room in Geneva. She didn't call. She sent a single, measured email. She acknowledged what had been good. She was clear about what wasn't working. She wished him well and meant it. Then she closed her laptop, ordered room service, and went back to preparing for a board presentation. Derek called 11 times before noon. She didn't answer once. What followed was 18 months of steadily escalating contact. Emails, social media messages, a voice note that ran 7 minutes long, swinging from apology to accusation within the same breath. Once he sent flowers to her office in Zurich with a card that read, "I just want to talk." She had security log it and returned to work. Eventually, she consulted a lawyer. The contact slowed, but it never fully stopped because Derek had done something that obsession always does. He had rewritten what happened. In his version, Maya hadn't left a relationship that wasn't working. She had betrayed him. She had gotten too big for her roots. She had forgotten where she came from and who had been there in the beginning. He just needed one opportunity to say so. He found it 14 months later, scrolling through his phone at midnight. A photograph from a charity dinner in Seoul. Maya in ivory silk, smiling the kind of smile that doesn't perform for the camera. Beside her, a man with silver at his temples and the posture of someone who needed nothing from anyone. The caption listed him simply as Marcus Weil. Derek started searching. The results were thorough and unusual. European investment networks, shipping infrastructure. A logistics empire that stretched from Hamburg to Jakarta. One article mentioned, almost in passing, that a competitor had abruptly exited the Korean market following a contract dispute. Another referenced a civil case that had been settled so completely it left no public record whatsoever. Marcus Weil was not a man who operated loudly. He was a man who operated permanently. Derek should have closed his browser. He did not close his browser. 3 weeks later, he was on a flight to Seoul. 12 hours in economy class, rehearsing a confrontation he had already decided was destiny. He convinced himself this was love. He convinced himself this was the moment. What he was actually doing was confusing obsession for courage and a grudge for a love story. When he landed, he did not go to a hotel. He found a uniform rental service near the airport and walked out with a catering jacket 2 sizes too large for his frame. He told himself nobody would notice. He told himself confidence was the only costume he needed. He was wrong about several things that evening, but that particular miscalculation was perhaps the most expensive. He found the venue from a social post a guest had made that afternoon. A private estate on the outskirts of the city. Lanterns, manicured gardens, the kind of quiet that only money can manufacture. Derek slipped through a service entrance with a tray of champagne flutes and walked directly into the middle of Maya's wedding reception. He saw her immediately, and something inside him came apart. What Derek did not know was that Maya had already seen him. 40 seconds earlier, while accepting congratulations near the garden entrance, she had noticed a jacket that didn't fit. A walk she would have recognized in any crowd. Her pulse did not accelerate. Her hands did not tremble, because Maya Chen had spent her entire life training herself to stay composed precisely when the stakes were highest. In the 3 seconds between recognition and decision, she ran the calculation. Security intervening now meant a scene. A scene meant attention. Attention meant press. Press meant Marcus's name attached to something public and messy in a way that could cost him far more than one uncomfortable evening. Maya made the kind of decision that only a certain kind of person can make. She stayed exactly where she was. She let Derek approach, and when his hand came forward, she didn't step away. She took it. One sharp sound, one red mark blooming below her cheekbone, and then Marcus Weil moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, with the unhurried authority of a man who has never once needed to raise his voice to be heard. He placed one hand on Derek's shoulder, fingers pressing firmly into the space where the neck meets the collarbone, and said 3 words. "Come with me." 2 men in dark suits materialized from opposite sides of the room as if they had been waiting there all night, because they had. The hallway was narrow and quiet. A door closed behind them. The music resumed outside almost instantly. Marcus poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter on the side table. He set one in front of Derek and did not invite him to drink it. He sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at Derek for a long moment without speaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "You believe," he said, "that you are the injured party in this story." Derek opened his mouth. Marcus continued without pausing. "You're not." He opened a leather portfolio. Inside was a single document, already signed on one side, a line waiting at the bottom of the page. The terms were specific. The consequences of any breach were more specific still. Derek looked at the line. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the door, where one of the dark-suited men stood with his hands folded in front of him. Derek picked up the pen. The walk back to the reception felt longer than it was. Maya was standing near the terrace doors when Marcus found her. He came to stand beside her without ceremony, without explanation, and placed his hand gently at the small of her back. "Ready?" he asked. That was all. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. The string quartet was playing something warm and unhurried. Guests moved across the floor in pairs. The lanterns outside swayed softly in the evening air. And Maya Chen, who had learned very young that no one was coming to save her, who had built every wall herself and climbed every step alone, allowed herself to finally, fully exhale. Not because someone had rescued her, but because for the first time in a very long time, she hadn't had to fight the battle by herself. The past was sealed, the present was hers, and she intended to keep it that way. If you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Maya should have done differently, or whether Derek ever truly deserved a second chance. We read every single one.